Just a few months ago, I set up my camera in the wilderness of Alaska in order to record the most ruthless winter we had ever seen. During those months of cold and ice, all we could think about was heading south, and we fantasized about the day we'd reach the Caribbean Sea. Well, that day has arrived. From here on, the road ahead lies between the jungle and the coral reef. A journey between unbelievable volcanoes and beaches. Mangroves, where it's easy to get lost, and islands where you'd wish you'd get lost. We will travel through 7 countries full of picture-perfect landscapes and exciting experiences. But on the shores of the Caribbean, we will also discover the peace and calm of its villages. First off, we'll visit the Mennonite community, who live firmly rooted in the past. Then we'll toast with the Garifuna, who are experts at enjoying the present. And lastly, we'll visit the island home of the Kuna, whose future depends on tourism. I get the feeling this journey through Central America will be much more than just a vacation. Episode 6, On the Shores of the Caribbean. They say people from the Caribbean never hurry. They like to take things easy. No wonder. Who'd want to stress out in paradise? This leg of our trip around the world begins at the northernmost point of the Yucatan Peninsula. We've already visited Mexico's colonial cities, as well as its Mayan pyramids and villages. But as if that weren't enough, this country also has deserted beaches.
Las bocas de Silán son un lugar perfecto para evadirse. Están formadas por un conjunto de manglares y playas vírgenes donde apenas es posible ver rastro de presencia humana. Tan solo es necesario embarcarse durante 40 minutos para acercarse a una de las zonas más salvajes de Yucatán.
We've left the big cities behind in search of a somewhat more isolated place, and here, flamingos are all we have for company. The real adventure begins tomorrow, but if we want to explore the Caribbean, it's best we try to pace ourselves. We've been on the road for almost a year, traveling place to place, like free roaming migrant birds. It doesn't hurt to take a break once in a while. Waking up to find you've got a beach all to yourself is a great way to start the day. But everyone here has to fend for himself to find lunch or dinner.
Ahí va leche. Se me enganchó. Se soltó. Otro pequeño fracaso. Pero qué pescador estoy hecho. Venga, que ya tenemos cena también. ¿Qué tipo de pescado es este?
Este es el mero que se va a preparar ahorita en Tiquinchic.
En
Tiquinchic. Tiquinchic se prepara.
Today's menu is grilled zilam fish, served on a plate made of palm leaves. And the restaurant has truly amazing views. We'll have to work together to earn dessert.
Vamos a tratar de buscar
Esos que tiene, el que está acá en este costado, usted lo puede ver, tiene como unas pintitas negras.
Al vuelo, venga.
At this point, Dan seems to think he's Robinson Crusoe, but we all know he wouldn't get very far without help from the real experts.
Este se ve tierno.
Tierno.
Está tierno, puede ser que esté un poco salado. Eso,
A ver, lo probamos, a ver qué
si
tal.
está tan dulce, si le falta podemos buscar otro. ¿Le falta?
A mí me parece que está estupendo, ¿eh? A ver, Alfonso. A ver si está rico. Lo has probado, ha acabado con el coco, ¿eh?
We leave the beach and coconut trees behind and head inland on the rivers. The tropical regions are like an immense natural garden by the sea. But on the Yucatan Peninsula, it's also easy to find little treasures of water hiding within the labyrinth of the mangrove forest.
Este es uno de los muchos cenotes que hay en la región, pero ¿qué es un cenote exactamente?
Acá es un nacimiento de agua dulce. Toda esa agua viene de la parte del subsuelo. Todo lo que es el manto que tiene abajo el agua, todo el manto acuífero que tiene esto, es una salida de agua. Eso es lo que tenemos acá en los cenotes.
There are many types of cenotes. We've seen some further inland hidden underground, forming grottos with springs full of crystal clear water. The fact is that they are all irresistibly attractive, and when you're standing before a natural well, there's something you can't help doing. As the rivers flow out to the Caribbean Sea, we realize that an ecosystem has developed here with cormorants, pelicans, and every imaginable sort of tropical bird. But it's also possible to encounter other types of fauna on these shores.
Es una mamá cocodrilo. Hay que extremar las precauciones porque en estos momentos está desovando, pero ver de cerca estos reptiles es una experiencia única.
I saw that coming. Some people learn their lessons, and others don't. We'd better continue on our way. I must say, initially we had no intention of stopping in Cancun, but after the mangroves and crocodiles, Dan insisted he needed to make a technical stop. And really, since Cancun is on the way anyway, who can blame us for wanting to spend just a few hours here? Sooner than we would have liked, we traded in the margaritas and deck chairs for a highway that would take us to Belize. We have to drive along the Mayan Riviera to travel across the Yucatan Peninsula all the way to the border. Once in Belize, our party decides to split up. Jose Luis and I will sail up the rivers and head inland. Dan will travel by car and meet up with us again further up. The new river runs along the country's north. Our photographer is bent on piloting this barge himself in order to enter the jungle. But while he's busy concentrating on driving the boat, I much prefer to have a look around at our surroundings. If you look closely, it won't take you long to discover that the riverbank attracts all sorts of animals. And among the more exotic birds is the jaribus, a sort of enormous stork that lives on the American continent. But of all the river's inhabitants, we found these the most impressive of all. It's almost as if we'd just run into Tom Sawyer himself, sailing on the rivers of Belize in the middle of the 21st century. Further inland, we discover that Dan has already got in touch with Belize's Mennonite community, which is to say, he's basically travelled several centuries back in time. The Mennonites live with their backs to the modern world, which they consider to be sinful. They arrived from Holland several generations back, and they still live here, just as they did years ago, turning the jungle into fields to grow papaya, or into sawmills to build their homes. They do not intermarry with other races. They live by their own rules and reject any sort of technology.
Aquí se vive en el campo, se evita las grandes ciudades, no hay coches. ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué no hay coches?
Queremos enseñar a los chamacos vivir en cosas antiguas, no cosas modernas. Yo no digo con otra gente que tienen esas cosas es malo, pero para mí, digo, para los otros es malo.
Cuando alguien queda enfermo, ¿no le llevan a un buen hospital?
Sí.
Lo digo porque los hospitales utilizan esa tecnología del mundo moderno que ustedes rechazan de alguna manera.
Siempre tenemos que usarlo, las cosas modernas. Aunque no tenemos esas cosas en la casa, pero siempre tenemos que usarlo.
Ajá. Yo soy una persona que vive de la tecnología. Según su punto de vista, ¿cómo debería mejorar mi vida? ¿Prescindiendo de eso?
Bueno, cuando Jesucristo quería entrar en su pueblo, Él no usaba ni uno de esos buenos caballos, Él usaba un burro.
Pero era hace 2000 años. Y si Jesucristo hubiese tenido internet, puede que todo el planeta fuera cristiano.
To be fair, we must admit the Mennonites have given us a friendly welcome. They are polite and peaceful people who live according to their beliefs. I admit I would find it difficult to fit in here. Many of them will never even leave because travelling is also looked down upon. Poor Mennonites. Today we'll spend the night in Lamanai, one of those places that invite contemplation, napping, and maybe even an afternoon stroll around the jungle. But on that stroll, José Luis is about to make several new discoveries. Our guide calls himself Rambo, and that doesn't make me feel at ease at all, quite the contrary.
Bueno, Rambo, ¿cuánto tiempo has vivido aquí en la selva?
38 years I live in the jungle.
38 años. ¿Y qué animales podemos ver?
Mono, crocodile,
Cocodrilos.
jaguars in this jungle.
Yo lo que tengo es un pánico a las arañas terrible, ¿sabes? Uf.
Sometimes you have to look behind you, sometimes ahead, and sometimes we look up to see who's watching our every step.
Monkeys.
It's been a somewhat surrealist day for us between the Mennonites who have never seen a cell phone and a guide who talks with monkeys. In the late afternoon, we are left alone, only to discover that Lamanai still has one final surprise in store. We are suddenly reminded of our travels through the Mayan world. In the heart of Belize, you can also enjoy watching the sun set from a pyramid surrounded by exotic birds, howling monkeys, and a sea of palm trees. In order to visit the coast of Belize, we'll have to brave several dirt roads before reaching the smallest national capital in the world, Belmopan. But Belize is easy to get around in, because distances are short and it doesn't take us long to reach the southern beaches. Navigating the waters of Belize is like diving into some office worker's screensaver.
We're here inside a place called Belize. We're on the island called Laughing Bird Key, the national park. Me is Amrasby. This is Gerald. Yeah. And it's nice to say peace.
Not a single cliché is missing here. Crystalline water with the Caribbean's balsamic color, the palm trees and the white sand, pelicans and all. But something that's not in plain sight makes this place even more irresistible. Our photographer is about to trade in his camera for a pair of diving goggles. For a while, I'm the only one who'll continue to work, so we can record this underwater wonder. Underneath the blue waters of Belize, you'll find the largest coral reef anywhere on the planet outside of Australia. After diving just a few minutes, we find the coral with thousands of colourful fish and moray eels. On dry land, everything is back to normal. Back to the road and behind the wheel. Leaving Belize means leaving behind the jungles, the pyramids, the Mennonites, the beaches and the coral reef. That's a lot of excitement for such a small country. The good news is we're going back to Guatemala, where we've always felt at home. And this time we're also going to discover its Caribbean coast.
El río Dulce nace en este punto y nosotros tenemos dos opciones. ¿Qué elegiríais vosotros? ¿Navegar por las orillas del lago Izabal o descender el río y acercarse a las poblaciones alegres, exóticas y a las playas blancas del Caribe? Nosotros también.
While following the Maya's trail, we explored this country inland, but now we want to travel the Dulce River in order to reach the sea. And on this journey, we are surrounded by lush greenery. Vegetation grows without restraint on vertical walls, on the riverbank, and on the water.
¡Qué lugar!
This can only possibly be a land of fishermen, or maybe a land of people who've decided to hide amid the river and the palm trees. At the end of the road, we reach Livingston. People from Asia and Africa have made their way to this corner of Guatemala and turned Livingston into a model of cultural integration. A very wise mayor organized the city by giving each community a neighborhood that would be suitable to its customs. The Latins and Hindus share the inland territory. Mayas live along the rivers, and the Garifuna spread their nets along the coast, sharing their fishing areas with the pelicans. The Garifuna people are Central America's only black community, and some of them live outside the city, isolated. Garnal has settled between the forests and the Dulce River, and has become a veritable authority on the Garifuna people.
Un sitio muy tranquilo este, ¿no?
Creo que es el presidente o representante de derechos humanos. Vino a hacer un reconocimiento a Livingston como el municipio de La Paz, que a pesar de que habemos 4 etnias aquí en Livingston, no es un pueblo conflictivo. ¿Cuántos años tenemos de vivir juntos? Y vamos a la escuela todos. Aunque yo hablo garífuna, aquel habla quechí, este habla español.
It's easy to get caught up in the Garifuna spirit. They always seem to be smiling. And if it hasn't been a great day, cheer comes in a bottle.
Tenemos una bebida, te estaba hablando del Gifiti.
El Gifiti.
Gifiti. Yo fui el que le puse Viagra garífuna, porque yo recuerdo que mi abuelito lo tenía debajo de la cama. El palo de hombre lo amarga. Y este le da un poco de olor. Y este le da color, la China Roots. Y entre más tiempo lo dejas tú ahí, mucho mejor.
Más fuerza tiene.
¿Cómo no?
Con lo cual más contenta está la mujer, ¿no?
Tú sabes, ¿me entiendes? La mujer quiere atención, es como el niño.
Pues vamos a probarlo, ¿no? A ver
Sí,
qué
hombre,
tal.
salud, pues, mi brother. Hombre.
In Livingston, everyone lives together in such harmony that there's hardly any crime here. It doesn't exist. Perhaps that's because there's no room for thieves in a place where no one aspires to be richer than his neighbor. It's very hard to reach the town by land. There are few cars, and it's easier to get around on a bike. Aston is 18 years old and hopes to spend the rest of his life here. To him, it's important that tourists come and visit his village.
Nosotros los garífunas, muchos salimos de aquí a otros lugares, a otro país, ¿me entiendes? Porque no hay trabajo, no hay un fuente de trabajo. Y si hay más turismo, más estará más buena mi familia, ¿me entiendes? Yo trabajando con el turismo y todo.
¿Y tú cambiarías este lugar por algún otro? ¿Te irías a vivir a algún otro sitio?
Por ninguno. Aunque me dieran todos los millones del mundo, no cambiaría mi tierra. Mi tierra es mi tierra, Livingston. Lo amo de corazón, ¿me entiendes?
The African spirit has taken root in the Caribbean, and this can only result in creating a festive ambience.
Aquí si tú vienes aquí a Livingston es a disfrutar, es a probar el tapado, el raizambín, la machuca, es a probar la cultura garífuna, ¿me entiendes?
Oye, amigo, ¿y tú conoces algún local, algún sitio donde podamos ir
sí,
a pasarlo bien?
A pasarlo re bien, yo conozco un lugar que se llama Ubafu, man. Aquí nomás está, man, chicas
pues
bien
nos acercamos.
preciosas.
Pues nos vamos.
When the sun sets, the Garifuna do their best to liven up the night. They entertain tourists with their dances and the beat of their drums. Later, they'll continue to play music in Livingston's humble districts, but just for the Garifuna themselves. Livingston's Garifuna are not the only people to have settled in Central America. We are about to enter Honduras to follow the trail of a society that knows nothing about borders. Jose Luis and Dan have split the route. Our photographer gets to stay in the Caribbean, so for the time being, we'll follow him on his difficult pilgrimage from beach to beach. We heard there were Garifuna communities living in archipelagos around the Caribbean. So we'll visit Roatan, the largest island in Honduras. We've been following a fascinating route for days, bordering the world's most coveted sea. Now, just by peeking out the airplane's window, we understand why. And down on the sand, the view is even better. Roatan has been a popular vacation spot for quite some time now. Foreigners come here hoping to lounge and simply relax. And any place is good if you want to get back home with a deep Caribbean tan. We also had the chance to enjoy watching a few dolphin shows. And we even got to ride a boat that had an underwater observation tank. But after all is said and done, most beach resorts all tend to be pretty much alike. This time we're looking for something else. If we want to discover the isolated worlds that inhabit this part of Central America, we'll have to leave Roatan behind to find an island made to measure in the Cayos Cochinos. In order to fully enjoy the Caribbean, you have to experience what it would be like to be stranded here, literally isolated. And there are many places here where you can get lost. On some keys, there's nothing but palm trees and a pink boa or two. This type of serpent is widespread in this part of the world. But among these white sandy keys, there is also a place for mankind. Garifuna communities live scattered among these tiny islands, some of which are no more than 900 feet long by 100 feet wide. And when we finally set foot in one of these villages, I get the feeling that I'm in the most peaceful place on earth. We've reached a spot where children sail the ocean blue to go to school, and where all the adults share a single occupation: fishing. There are no major ports. Each works out of their own boat, and every afternoon they repeat the same scene, the same routine. Some Garifuna live on islands that can be covered in a 5-minute walk, and the children have to learn the fishing trade starting at a very young age. The evening starts after a brief siesta, and is inconceivable without a sip of gifiti.
Oh, está fuerte, ¿eh?
Fuerte.
Y rico.
Pega.
Sabroso.
Y es afrodisíaco.
¿A
aquí con mis amigos acá al lado. Estamos viéndola bien. Enfoca a mi amigo allá. Él es mi amigo allá, ¿ves? Todo crazy, ¿va?
Mire, si usted se duerme solo, se levantan dos.
Anyone who visits these islands will, sooner or later, ponder the possibility of leaving it all behind to live here. But in the end, it's the Garifuna who stay, and the foreigner is simply left with fond memories of a place resembling paradise. Gradually, we leave the coast behind, and for several days, we travel through Nicaragua's inland roads. This is a country full of volcanoes, spectacular lakes, and thick jungles where there is hardly any space left for humans. But in its cities, we discover a cheerful country. I guess Granada's colourful colonial square has something to do with this. Or perhaps it's the tasty local dishes. Or it might just be due to the catchy tunes played on the marimba. The fact is, people in Nicaragua have somehow managed to confront a history full of wars and a present in which getting on the train of progress is a struggle. In less than 2 weeks, we've traded in the waters of the Caribbean for jungle paths. We've travelled over almost 500 miles, alternating between the coast of Honduras and the landscapes of Nicaragua. But it won't be long before we cross another border. The people of Costa Rica like referring to their country as pure life. And we will certainly discover quite a few life experiences here.
Bienvenidos.
Volcanoes, beaches and excitement. That's what's waiting for us on the other side of the border.
El principal atractivo de Costa Rica es su naturaleza y a lo largo del país se puede disfrutar desde todos los puntos de vista.
This is a really good way to visit the Rincón de la Vieja National Park. We've come to Costa Rica hoping to explore the country inside and out, and with no holds barred.
Vamos a la siguiente. Venga, hasta luego.
It looks as though Daniel may have gotten over his vertigo on this zipline, but that's hardly complicated. What's really impressive is if you can do this while using both hands to manage the camera and record him.
Pues aquí nos hemos quedado.
¿Y ahora qué hacemos?
The tour of Rincón de la Vieja also offers us quite a few vertical challenges.
Seguro que ya estoy viendo emociones por hoy, ¿no?
All right, we're ready. We definitely deserve a break. Now we'll slow down for a while. A cable car crosses the Arenal National Park. Central America is an untamed land. A place where raging volcanoes grow just as naturally as does the vegetation. That may be precisely what makes the region so attractive. Well, that and the constant sense of adventure.
Uno, dos, y...
We'd just about forgotten we were following the tracks of the Caribbean societies. But we're not going to meet any native communities now. For once, we won't be looking for humans. Today, we'll sail down the rivers that lead to the Tortuguero National Park. And in this part of the country, it's the animals that lay down the law. From this point on, we'll have to shut off the motor, move slowly, and keep our eyes peeled.
Tortuguero es un lugar fascinante. Remontando sus ríos podemos acercarnos a la parte más salvaje del país. Aquí habitan los cocodrilos más grandes de América, los perezosos, monos y aves exóticas. Pero lo que da nombre a este parque nacional es el hecho de que la mitad de las tortugas de todo el mundo vienen a desovar aquí.
We're surrounded by life. The density of species is overwhelming. There are almost 400 types of birds in the park, not to mention reptiles or monkeys, or an infinite number of other animals.
¡Qué cocodrilo! Es un cocodrilo enorme.
We try to watch them from the boat. Meanwhile, they're busy trying to hide. Sometimes we need to keep a minimum safe distance as we approach, without losing sight of them. But it never occurs to us to stop and think that it's really they who are keeping an eye on us. Behind the vegetation, there's always a pair of eyes watching us. We are the trespassers here.
Está mirando mal.
On Tortugueros beaches near the open sea, we no longer feel claustrophobic. This part of the Caribbean is atypical. There's no crystalline water or hundreds of towels on the sand. Only turtles mark their territory here. And when the sun sets, we'll see why. One of nature's most amazing spectacles takes place on the beaches of Costa Rica. Hundreds of turtles from all over the world come here with a single goal in mind.
Esta es sin duda la primera vez que una tortuga me llena de tierra la cara, el cuerpo entero, pero tiene una buena razón. Esta tortuga acaba de depositar sus huevos en este nido y cuando acabe de cubrirlo de tierra, volverá al mar de donde vino.
Turtles go into a trance while they're laying eggs. Sometimes they even cry from the sheer effort. A green turtle, such as this one, can lay anywhere from 100 to 120 eggs. With any luck, 1 or 2 baby turtles will live to become adults. Three or 4 years from now, this same turtle will come back to this same spot, on this same beach, to lay more eggs. It seems these animals are set in their ways. Some turtles travel well over 1,500 miles just to lay their eggs on the beach of their choice. Our friend has a long journey ahead of her. And well, in fact, so do we. For starters, we have to go back up the river and leave the Tortuguero behind. Then we'll have to get back in the car and continue on the highways of Costa Rica. We'll drive along the beaches of the Pacific for a while before crossing over to Panama, the last border on this part of our trip. These are the cloud forests of the Chiriquí region, an uncommon combination of low-lying mountain and tropical vegetation. The result is this exuberant wildlife. Plants here are huge. they reach prehistoric proportions. In addition to orchids and other exotic flowers, this is where the tapir and the panther live. It's also home to the legendary bird, the quetzal. And in the valleys surrounding the legendary Baru volcano, humans have also settled. This place is full of peasant farmers. People used to working at high altitudes because life here takes place on a vertical plane. Boquete is the only city in the area, and peasant farmers from all over the region sell their products here.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
¿Pero esto es dulce o salado? ¿Cómo es?
Saladito.
¿Pero esto cómo se prepara?
Cocido, con candela.
¿Y luego qué se toma? ¿Con arroz?
Con café o leche.
Ah.
Café o leche.
¿Y cómo se ve que estén más maduras o menos?
Sí.
¿Cómo se mira eso?
El color.
O sea, ¿esta es la más madura? Sí. Venga, pues me voy a llevar una, ¿no? Esta más dulce, ¿no? Sí. Esta me llevo. Ya tenemos postre para la cena.
It's also common to find Guaymi women here, who have come to the city in search of the comforts the forests cannot offer them. Their colourful dresses play up their adolescent cheer. Their look is innocent. They're practically children. But many already look after children of their own. The Guaymi grow up really fast. We decided to take things a bit easier on the road that leads us away from Chiriquí. On this occasion, we're headed for the Pacific coast, and along this shoreline is one of the most prosperous capitals in all of Central America, Panama City. In 1519, a Spanish conquistador called Pedro Arias thought that this spot would make a good place to build the first city in the Americas to look out on the Pacific Ocean. Some 500 years later, we came to visit what's left of Panama City's historic district. This place has a history that is plagued with pirates, invasions, earthquakes and fires. But the city has managed to carry on, even if its neighborhoods are like different worlds. The Old Town gives us another taste of Latin American culture. It is full of people in the afternoons, and the best possible plan here consists of strolling the streets of this tropical city, or watching life pass by from its balconies. It's clear that people in Panama live at two very different paces. The modern part is more universal and therefore has less of a personality. Here the city grows vertically, and the buildings look out over a sea with no beaches for tourists to lie on. Although it's not too awful to stay on the 42nd floor of a hotel. Pedro Arias 5 centuries back was right to settle here, because this is the only place where two oceans meet. And that attracts boats, which attract trade, which attracts money. We've come to Miraflores to see the lock and watch the freighters from the shore. And standing here, we really get the sense that we're looking at an entire city moving along beside us.
Este es el sistema de esclusas del Canal de Panamá, una de las maravillas de la ingeniería moderna que lleva casi 100 años funcionando y que hacen de este punto uno de los lugares estratégicos del mundo.
These locks compensate for the different water levels between the oceans and the inland rivers. That makes it possible to navigate the canal's 50 miles. In the past century, some 700,000 ships have negotiated this narrow strip of water. Boats pay an average of $54,000 in tolls to go through the canal, but this shortcut saves them hundreds of miles, thousands of gallons of fuel, and many, many hours at sea. Though we mustn't forget, these interoceanic ships are cruising the wilderness. We're here at Gamboa National Park to experience what it was like to sail these waters before the canal, in a small boat and with a nagging feeling that we are not alone here.
¿Quieres? ¿Qué quieres? ¿Qué quieres? ¿Pan? ¿Por qué? Toma.
It seems to me a piece of bread isn't precisely this guy's favorite dish. No, I don't think he's happy. As we get farther from the banks, we discover that the real threat for our boat is having to dodge transatlantic ships all up and down the river. This place makes you feel strange, very small. At this point, we're about to take a sailboat out on the open sea because it's impossible to get to Colombia over land. In Panama, we've spent days traveling from one ocean to another, but from now on, we'll focus on the Caribbean. The car will travel directly to Cartagena by boat. We are going to make another stop before we get there. We won't be setting sail until all 12 passengers have boarded this 36-foot-long sailboat. We'd better get used to this. We'll spend 5 days sailing with 9 total strangers, although they won't be total strangers for long.
Bien, muchachos.
One key.
It takes us over a day and a half to reach the first islands of the San Blas archipelago. But before we get off the boat, the Kuna Indians approach us, trying to sell their handicrafts. They look rather exotic and are skilled at navigating their canoes. But their eagerness for foreign dollars dampens the charm of our first encounter. The coral reefs make it impossible for the boat to reach the shore, so we have to use canoes to reach yet another paradise.
Perfecto. Esta es la parte difícil, ¿no?
Although, even to enter paradise, you may have to pay a few tolls. We just got off the boat at Naluenga, one of the 360 islands that make up the Cunayala region. Nalunega has 400 inhabitants and an age-old history. It belongs to Panama, but retains a certain degree of independence, with its own laws and a culture that has survived the conquistadors' wars. The Kuna even allied themselves with British pirates to fight against the Spanish invaders. Nowadays, the community ranks above the state, and also above the individual. They do everything as a group.
Laureano, la gente colabora, todo el pueblo, en la construcción de cada una de las casas.
Todo que tú, bueno, pues la casa un poquito feo, que tú no quieres, bueno, y él te ayuda.
O sea, todos están obligados,
todos están obligados. Desde que tú no lo haces, te multan $5.
O sea, las mujeres hacen las labores del hogar y los hombres son los que trabajan.
Ajá, ¿no? Sí, todos los hombres lo trabajan. Viste pescar, viste las mujeres nada más, ama de casa, viste para beber, a dormir.
This society has the same structure it had hundreds of years ago. The women still wear their molas, with rings covering their arms and legs. Everything on the San Blas Islands is exotic, even its pets.
¿Qué clase de mono es este?
Mono tití.
Mono tití. Es muy pequeño, ¿no? ¿Es grande ya? ¿Me lo puedes dejar? Hola. Uy, está protestando mucho. ¿Ya le habéis dado de comer?
There's something magical about these houses made of palm fronds. But inside we discover that its inhabitants have no desire to feel completely isolated. In any event, to really understand the Kuna people, you have to paddle.
En la mayoría de las islas es casi imposible ver un coche, un vehículo terrestre. Por eso hemos decidido dar un paseo al viejo estilo de los Kuna, con un remo y una canoa local.
This is all it really takes to feel free. From the water, the Kuna's land looks like an even more attractive place. You don't have to go far to realize that these islands have also been blessed by the Caribbean. It's enough just to observe how calm and composed its people are. And all you have to do is go for a dive to realize that life also goes on underneath the water. We go ashore several times on several different beaches and discover, for instance, that the octopus symbol on the Kuna flag looks like another symbol that no longer stands for anything. As we leave Naluenga behind, we realize that most of the islands in this archipelago are deserted, and that oh-so-Caribbean thought crosses my mind. Why can't I just stay and live here? It's really tempting, but we still have a trip round the world ahead of us. From now on, we'll have to sail a bit faster. The water isn't always completely calm. At times, we are accompanied by killer whales, and there are moments when we travel alone, unfurling our sails. We are getting closer and closer to the mainland. The city of Cartagena will welcome us to South America. But that is another story.